Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet that's hugely urban, with over 80% of the world's population in urban areas, and we add about 2 billion new souls, how we're going to be able to take care of all the infrastructure needs and the basic food, the fuel, and the fiber that's going to take care of these people as we go to a planet with 9 billion people. And a lot of that is really on innovation and new ideas. I have a gentleman sitting with me who is involved in cloud computing, big data, and a number of other gigantic ideas. He's Jeffrey Mason. He's an attorney, so he has the title of Esquire. Co-founder, CEO of Fast Patent Partner, LLC. Jeff, welcome back to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam.
Glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about, since some people may not know, what is Fast Patent Partner?
Sure. Well, we use big data to help patent lawyers in litigation win their cases, and also to innovative companies to control their costs.
And we talked about earlier, we first started talking about this and the whole notion of litigation. We're the positive news guys. So we want you guys to be doing your work and help people to stay out of litigation. So how do you use big data, and how does the Fast Patent Partner actually do that so that people actually can work together, collaborate, and they're in a collaborative environment?
So when we reduce costs, what we do is we look at big data sets which tell us what patent attorneys have the most experience in a certain area. And that's the most important thing. We've talked about that in prior programs, that technical background is such an important thing. So you can really actually get objective metrics off of the USPTO databases by looking at who's actually signed these kinds of documents, and so it's a great way to control your costs, because then you're not just going on someone's bio or their word or their education. You actually can look at, objectively speaking, this person has more experience than anybody else, and plus they're in an area of the country that we know, statistically speaking, is lower cost. And so that's a great way for people to save a lot of money and get really good advice.
Now, looking at, you're an attorney yourself, and you're working with attorneys, but also you're in the IT world, the information technology world. So how are you blending these two, and what was the crossover, or is it just a blending, or is there a cross between the IT and the legal world?
Well, big data is where the data becomes so large, it becomes a very big technical issue, and new kinds of ways of visualizing and dealing with it are necessary. So I started out in the law firm world and saw what basically was you could do at that level, and started realizing that by bringing much more information to the picture, there's a lot of value to be added. So yeah, there is a progression there, but it definitely is a technical challenge that required me to get smarter with IT and also work with some really smart people.
Now, we're broadcasting around the globe, so many people may not really, may have heard the term big data, but in many countries, there's very little data, period. So what is actually the definition of big data? And then the bridge to all this, of course, is this cloud computing concept.
Yeah, so big data is essentially data that is overwhelming in your particular sector. Okay, so certain sectors have always dealt with a lot of data, so that's not a big problem for them. Others have not, and so it's really a question of how much data does your organization typically process, and if you go 10x, 100x more than that, it becomes overwhelming. It becomes overwhelming to you as the user, also to your systems. All kinds of different areas will start to break down, and that's fundamentally what big data is about, is trying to push those barriers back as far as we can.
So then the cloud computing?
Well, cloud computing then is a way of buying computer time in a very scalable fashion, so that with lots of data, if you're not doing much with the data, you don't need a lot of computing power, but all of a sudden you may have great needs for it. And a great example of this is something like when you type a search into Google, as you're typing, it's coming up with all these incredible results from all over the web, which is a massive data source.
And it could be from any country, could be any corner of the globe.
Well, Google actually, there's limits to what they crawl. In fact, some of the technology companies that I've dealt with do deep crawling of the web, which does 10 times as much as what Google does. But still, it's still a massive data set. And when you're doing those kinds of typing, cloud computing is what really allows you to get those results back super fast. And then when you're just browsing and clicking through, and the various web servers around the world that are serving up the pages, there's not nearly the same computational intensity. But to a user, that just makes the experience much more seamless. So cloud computing is a way to make big data manageable.
Now, looking at that, and how do people really realize the promise of big data? You know, we hear about big data, cloud computing has been around for a couple of years now, and everything was moving into the cloud, and it's kind of the thought of, you know, there's these white cumulus things floating in the universe, and that's cloud computing, but it really is not that at all. So there's very hard technology that goes involved in all this. How do you realize the promise of big data?
You probably do it stage by stage and project by project. I mean, you can do this all at once where you move all your data into the cloud and make everything cloud-based, but that may be overkill. I mean, you certainly probably want to look at the areas where you're finding that things are too slow. I mean, they're not happening fast enough for you, and focus on projects there. You know, bring in some good consultants. I mean, we definitely work with excellent IT consultants. I mean, Amazon Web Services is a great example. They're a huge cloud provider. So there are lots of different, you know, choices out there, and in fact, it's bewildering how many there are. So you definitely want to, you know, hire somebody to really do a nice job with that. But pick a project where it's not too ambitious, where you're not trying to do too much at once. I think it's important to really do it in a way that's measured.
Now, we talk about, you know, going out and hiring consultants and all that. Of course, you know, the clock is ticking, the cash register is moving forward as far as charges, and we're reaching out to many developing countries on the African continent, Southeast Asia, Latin America. So how do countries and companies in these countries, and also governments and NGOs, make available of all of this when they're in countries where computing may be slow, there may still be dial-up, you know, these kinds of things. So how do they realize, again, this promise?
It's challenging, but I think there probably you're going to look to actually educate people. I mean, there are lots of excellent groups, like General Assembly is a company that's out there that's actually giving a lot of great technology courses. So there are a lot of companies that are out there, and actually their whole business model is to educate people even better. And so, in fact, if you really have a huge commitment like that, where you really want to, you know, sustain and actually create an infrastructure that doesn't really exist, you really do have to start with education first of all.
Yeah, looking at big data, you know, one of the things, there's a small group of people that are still denying climate change is not real, and, you know, this is, you know, it's not man-made, it's a natural cycles and all that. So how can you combine big data and the research along with statistics to say this is what really is happening out there?
Well, I think what's really nice about cloud computing is that back in the old days, you'd have a supercomputer somewhere, and only a few people would have access to it. So if your weather models, your climate models, you'd really have a very small group of people that can do that. What cloud computing and big data really does is democratize the process a lot more, so that really everybody now can really tap into incredible amounts of computing power. So I think that ultimately will, in fact, assist the development of better climate control models, because you have much more people that are actually able to get involved in it.
So looking at the whole thing of as far as what you're doing in the legal space, because you're really looking at intellectual property protection in many ways. You're allowing firms to have access to knowledge about other intellectual properties, whether it's here, it could be India, China, Japan, or what have you. So when you're matching this up, and then we were talking about climate change, environmental impacts, how does big data fit into all this so that, you know, we're putting all the keys together, all the cogs are starting to fit so people really know what's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the ways in which we use our big data set is to sort of landscape exactly what's going on. I mean, looking at the innovation, looking at the pipeline in the United States Patent and Trademark Office, it's a massive amount of information. There's a huge number of different applications there. And so really trying to get your hands around those kinds of competitor information is really important and very difficult. So there really is a need, but that ultimately will spur innovation.
Mm-hmm. Looking at innovation and big data, you know, this is one of the things that I know you've been focused on virtually all of your career, even when you were functioning as an attorney, now doing the IT. Looking at that innovation, what do people need to start thinking about as they're starting to come up with new ideas, new data sets, even if they're, say, in a country in Africa where there's really not that emphasis upon, you know, patents, copyrights, trademarks, and protecting your processes?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, but I would say that, you know, and certainly when you're talking about, I mean, big data and statistics have a very interesting relationship. I mean, historically, statistics have given us great insight into, you know, how to do things better, certainly how to hone processes. Engineers certainly learn how to do, make things work better. And I think in developing countries as well, you're certainly going to be able to learn a great deal from, you know, looking at the data that you have about how successful your agricultural programs are, that kind of thing. So I think that, you know, when you start with statistics, you can certainly go that much better with big data, because then you're really no longer just using a mathematical model for something. You're actually looking at the raw information and seeing new things. Something
we haven't really talked about, but social networks are critical. They're critical no matter what country you're in, how open or closed a society may be. You know, it's replete as far as what's happening across northern Africa, the Middle East, even some countries of Asia. So how does big data help to leverage and or work in this whole thing as far as what they call social networks through the internet?
Right, so the social networks live and die by how much fun they are to use and how engaging they are, and also how simple they are to use, because when Facebook first started out versus MySpace, Facebook had a very clear template. MySpace sort of did, you know, anything you wanted to, and it led to chaos. And so Facebook really developed a very regimented system, but it was mostly about what you leave out. So big data really helps you sort of see different features, how well they're being tested, how they're being used. You need to know that to design your system. Actually, it was one of the other big problems MySpace had, is they couldn't keep their system online because the users were using it in such an unusual kind of way, and they weren't anticipating that. So big data really helps social networks engage because it lets them design their systems correctly and also see just how much, you know, the users are using them, and let marketers also tap into that information and you know, get a return on their investment.
So how do we look at that? So you're with a law firm, you're in a corporation or an NGO, and you want to leverage the social network. Let's say it's like LinkedIn or Facebook, YouTube, you know, whatever it may be. So how do we leverage that using the information we have, but how can we reach into the social network that we have to gain leverage and actually understand more about what's going on within our sphere of influence?
Yeah, I mean, there are some people that are extremely good at this, that work at PR firms, for example, but they come from places like USA Today, where they had been doing, you know, very large scale, you know, programs where they got 200,000 people into a particular group, you know, with $0 budget. Okay, I don't know how to do that myself. I would need to hire someone to do that.
You're still trying to figure that one out.
No, I'm going to hire that guy is what I'm going to do. But I mean, but that's just it, is that, you know, you may have on your staff somebody with that kind of experience, because a lot of people, you know, I'm an older person that compared to a lot of the folks that are doing this sort of stuff. So they may have grown up with it and may have their own success stories. And if they do, leverage the heck out of it, because it's a very valuable kind of skill set. If you don't have it, then there definitely are groups out there that have it on offer. And I think that that's where I would be looking if that was the situation we're in.
Something we haven't really talked about, and of course this was in my last question about this whole thing of social networks. What are some of the social networks as far as the sphere that you're operating in with attorneys, particularly patent attorneys, that may be viable as far as others that are watching this that may be, you know, again, in Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, wherever it may be? Yeah,
well, LinkedIn is the one that we would mainly use because we're more of a B2B kind of play, and so for certainly companies that are looking to generate interest in a B2B issue, LinkedIn probably is the best one to go with. Facebook obviously is the more popular one, but that's, for most businesses, not quite right. It just depends on how much B2C work that you're doing. But that's, and then of course there are all these new platforms coming up all the time. And in fact, some of the most innovative companies that are out there are building whole new sort of sub-social networks within networks. And in fact, that does actually happen on a country basis. In fact, this is not really very well known, but Google at one point had their own social network, and it got basically sent to Brazil because the Brazilian people made a big play out of that, and they got very popular. All the advertising shifted over to Spanish language, and then they had to rebrand it and make it Brazil Social Network. So, you know, it's a very powerful tool, and every country can take advantage of it.
Well, Jeffrey Mason, who is the co-founder, CEO of Fast Patent Partner, thank you for being with us. And thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. and she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from the United States and Washington, D.C. as we're looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the processes, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And of course, we're looking for the people that are making a difference as well as the world goes to being in urban areas, over 80%. And at the same time, we have almost 9 billion people that will be joining up with us as far as the world is concerned. And so what are we going to be doing as far as looking at the world and how we're going to take care of these 2 billion new people are going to be joining us on the planet. And we have someone who's actually been thinking about and working with that for a long time now. Antigone G. Payton, she is an attorney, founder and CEO of Cloudergy Law, and I just love that name. And Antigone's been with us before, and welcome back.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Glad to have you. And I'm always intrigued by Cloudergy Law. So let's go for the folks who've not seen you before. Tell us about that, and then we'll start talking about the essence of what we're going to be covering.
Sure. So Cloudergy Law is a trademark. It's a made-up name, and it actually is meant to connote cloud computing and big data because it's made a great impact on our lives as well as the lives of our customers that we work with. So the idea is using next-generation technology to provide better transparency and to better communicate with our clients.
Looking at this whole notion of transparency, this is something that we've talked about before and it keeps coming up in your conversation. Why is transparency important when people are actually trying to innovate, bring out new technologies, new ideas, new processes, and yet you're saying be transparent?
Well, because as the technology becomes more complicated, the team becomes much more important and relevant. And only by sharing information transparently with clients can we better provide legal advice to them as well as receive feedback from them that ultimately leads, I think, to a better product for the client and better strategic advice.
So when we're looking at this transparency, is this something within the organization, among organizations, between the patent office and the company? I mean, where is this transparency taking place?
It's really intended to be all of the above, right? So we have communications with the patent office or the copyright office or the courts. We're communicating with our clients. We're communicating with third parties. And the ability to give our clients 24/7 access to this information and allow them to be part of the communications when it's appropriate, I think really improves the process and drives greater efficiency in the process.
Now you know what we're doing. We're covering the globe as far as, you know, with Emerald Planet TV, and we're reaching out to many emerging markets like in Africa, which is growing at a very rapid rate. A huge change on the continent of Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America as they become very progressive. Many of the most dynamic economies now are not in Europe and some parts of Asia and North America, but now are in these areas, the Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America and countries of the globe. So, and then they're not really used to this. You know, everything was kind of in-house and, you know, we'll take care of it ourselves. But yet they're joining a world community where this openness and transparency really is almost demanded. At the same time, they're now creating their own intellectual property. So how do they know how to strike this balance of how much do you share with the public? How much do you need to be sure to protect, you know, through patents, trademarks, and processes and all that?
That's a really interesting question. As we work with different cultures, we have to be sensitive to the culture and to the politics of the particular region. And that in part drives the legal regime that is in place. And it also should be part of the conversation that we have as we learn to share with our colleagues who are in China, who are in Japan, who are in Africa, and they're developing great economic engines, and they have a lot to offer the world when it comes to knowledge property as part of intellectual property. And the question is really, you know, how we fit within that larger regime and how we should be communicating, how we should be sharing things. But as part of this, since this is a big data component in this particular discussion, we have to be cognizant of the local privacy laws, the local regime, and how they feel about sharing of customer information and sensitive business information. It can in fact be illegal to transport that information out of the country or out of the jurisdiction. So we need to be thinking about this as we talk about this transparency and sharing and communication.
Looking at these areas, and let's just focus if we can, of course it's a very broad area, but you know, Southeast Asia, Asian countries, Africa, Latin America, because there's where some of these dynamic engines of economic change and social change are taking place at this time. So looking how can they harness big data and at the same time make sure that they're protecting the new intellectual property that they're developing within these countries, you know, like in a Uganda or a South Africa or even an El Salvador or Honduras or what have you. I mean, this is really a whole new world for some of these people.
It is, and it really depends where they are along the development timeline. There are some of these countries that seem to lack the basic internal infrastructure to do the big data computing that we're doing in the United States and some of the other first world countries. So I think that's one first challenge they face. But that doesn't mean that they don't have access to the benefits of big data. As long as they have a pipeline and the ability to get to a big data center or a company that's providing big data in cloud computing, they potentially have the ability to have the same benefits that the rest of us do. So it's really a matter for them, is it part of their infrastructure? And if not, is it something that they can access? So going to the intellectual property side, some might think this is the flip side, right? So one of the potential downsides of big data and cloud computing is once you put it out there and you aggregate it with other information, have you forever lost your IP rights, or have you done something that potentially impedes your IP rights? And that's something that they need to understand, not just based on their own laws, but on the laws of all the other places that might be touched by big data. So we truly are in a global community now when we talk about laws and we talk about intellectual property protection, because the lines are blurred today more than they ever were in the past.
And I think this, Antigone, this is already just accelerate. It's not the fact that it's just changing an incremental pace, but actually it's accelerating all the time. So if people are in a country, how do they know when to start this process as far as protecting their intellectual property, wherever it may be? It could be patents, trademark, copyrights, or the processes that they've developed that maybe is based on patents in the United States or Japan or Germany or someplace, but yet they have a whole new way of manifesting the process of that. So when do they start that process, and when do they need to find someone like you to say, okay, yeah, it's okay, you're in El Salvador or you're in Argentina, but look, you're really getting into the world market. You need to make sure that you're protecting yourself.
Well, that's a complicated question, and the answer is going to depend on the situations, but I will say generally something big happened in the United States recently. On the patent side, we went from a first to invent system to a first inventor to file system.
And I think we're the last country to do that, is that correct?
We were the holdout, right? We were the last one to make that change. Now we're different than a true first to file system, but the idea is once you put the information out, you better think carefully about running to the patent office if you have something that's potentially an invention and patentable, and make sure you get your priority in line. So that's certainly one thing that's a big issue. If you're going to start to talk about it publicly, if you're going to start to share it with other companies, if you're looking at strategic partnerships and you're going out and having a lot of public conversations, that's when the spidey sense should kick in, and you should start saying, you know what, I need to talk to somebody and make sure I'm doing this the right way and in a way I can protect it through contract, let's say, or confidentiality agreements, as long as I need to, until I have the technology at a point where it's ready to go to the patent office, or I'm ready to go get a trademark on something.
Now, looking at what you're doing, I know that you have this unique name, this Cloudagy law, which I really love. But at the same time, you really are using big data and cloud computing to go out and assess and make sure you're providing the best information possible to your clients. So when do you bridge that where it's really the IT world that you're straddling and then you get into the legal world, or are you always straddling IT and the legal community when you're in the big data world?
I feel like 50% of what we do every day is technology and 50% is the law.
So it really is a balance between those two.
It really is. And big data and technology plays such a part in our legal services today. They're really inextricably intertwined. So for instance, if we're looking at trademarks and whether somebody is potentially infringing another's trademarks, we have these huge multinational trademark databases now that are big data at its finest, and they really give us the ability to look all over the world almost and see if somebody has protected a particular brand or name in any country that recognizes trademark rights. On the patent side, we've got multiple patent offices all over the world that are looking at technologies. We now have databases and companies that specialize in aggregating that information and giving us very complicated search analytics that really allow us to parse through that and try to find if something's similar to what our clients are developing. So we need to learn more about big data. We need to become better technologists in order to better serve our clients.
Then going into the companies themselves, what do they really need to know? What do they need to understand about big data, cloud computing, so they not only enhancing what they're doing as far as their intellectual property, their processes and what have you, but how they in turn are working with their clients, not just from the standpoint of the legal aspects of this, but how are they leveraging what they're knowing, what they're learning out of the big data world, and then putting in to help their clients. And then I guess the underside of that is how then do they back in to make sure that they're protecting themselves legally and as they develop and evolve this intellectual property?
Well, one of the biggest things they have to realize is they have to treat it with respect, right? So whether we're talking about this in the context of cybersecurity or privacy or compliance with other federal, state, local laws or even international laws, they need to have great respect for the information that's entrusted to them in their physical security, as well as the way that they treat the data and share it with others through strategic partnerships. On the back end, when it comes to legal, that's really the bootstrapping of this same concept, treating the data with respect. So when you earn respect, you'll continue to get the data. So if there are big breaches that occurs and they don't treat it well, that can be a huge consumer confidence issue, and people might not want to share their data with them any longer. So we're really looking at the respect on the front end, and that really is part of the legal issues on the back end. They really work hand in hand together.
15 seconds, and that's all we've got. What do you see for the future of Cloudagy?
For Cloudagy, I see us continuing to use big data and cloud computing, playing, innovating, and figuring out how we can use these technologies to do what we do better.
Fantastic. Antigone G. Payton, thank you for being with us. She's the founder and CEO of Cloudagy Law and doing fantastic work, I have to attest. And thank you for sharing with us and sharing with our clients around the globe as together we work to create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org. or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. as we look for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking at 144 different nations looking for these best practices as we add 2 billion new souls by 2050 and possibly over 12 to 13 billion by the end of this 21st century. So how are we going to take care of all these people? And one of the big issues, of course, besides the food, the fuel, and the fiber, is healthcare and how we're going to be able to provide for those needs, plus the other infrastructure that's out there. We have 2 gentlemen that have been doing extensive research and come to us from a very international point of view. Dr. Raja Mazumdar, who is Associate Professor. He's in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Medicine, School of Medicine and Health Services, the George Washington University. I hope you get paid according to your title. That's a very long one. And then Dr. Vahan Simonian, who is the lead scientist on the HIVE project. He's the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and that's the United States Food and Drug Administration. So welcome, Raja and Vahan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. And it's interesting that you came out together, and I know, Vahan, you're here to actually reinforce what Raja's going to share with us, and thank you for doing that. So tell us a little bit about your work at George Washington University, and I'm very interested in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. What does that really mean, and how does that translate to the greater public good?
So one of the things that we do at George Washington University in my lab and what I do, and I collaborate with Dr. Simonian, is on big data in genomics and proteomics, basically biological big data. So as genomics is moving forward, the amount of data is increasing exponentially, super exponentially. So that's one of the things that we work on.
Well, it's absolutely incredible, and of course the topic we're really talking about is big data, cloud computing. What does that really mean, and how does that actually make more information available to the general public? And Vahan, you're working with the United States Food and Drug Administration, but you have something that's called the HIVE project. What is the HIVE project, and how does big data really fit into all that, and allows you to leverage the intellectual knowledge that you have, but also the new research that's coming out?
HIVE project is an infrastructure which allows you to work with extra large big data in a very democratic way. Unlike current methodology where all data generated from anywhere has to be transferred to these data centers which are capable of storing and analyzing, we are promoting a new paradigm where we are thinking not to transfer anything anywhere, just compute wherever it is generated. So HIVE project is that building that infrastructure together where we will allow the big data to become available not just for one center or another center which can afford to have that technology built into, but everyone can have that access to the big data. So we are shifting the paradigm and building that new platform. That is what core of HIVE project is.
Well, if I can go back and, Raja, if you don't mind, let me go back to Vahan for just a minute.
Sure.
I like this concept, but you're talking about the democratization of information, using and leveraging big data so it's available across platforms, but really across the globe. I think what you're talking about. So it's in democratic, non-democratic nations. It's across developing and developed nations. So how do you make sure that everybody has access to this, regardless of the type of government or even the sophistication or the level of knowledge within the society itself?
You see, Sam, there is a big cost associated to the big data handling. You have to have an infrastructure, enough computer power, enough optical cables, enough sequencing machines to produce this big data. And not everyone in the world currently can afford that technology. But if we bring the cost down by changing the architecture, if we can allow one single computer to become part of that big data game, we can allow other developing countries also become part of the game. And there are many aspects which the big data can help. The premise of the big data is very big. So if we can bring the cost down, we can bring everyone into this play of the big data game.
That's fantastic. So what you're doing at George Washington University then, Raja, is that you're really trying to reach out to somehow massage, develop, to work big data so that then it makes available somebody that's in a small country like a Uganda or an El Salvador or a Vietnam, and they don't have access to everything that you're doing at George Washington University, but at the same time then they can tie in with you, and then together you're collaborating. Is that how I'm understanding what you're doing?
So you're right. So HIVE stands for High Performance Integrated Virtual Environment. So it's a paradigm shift where the computation actually moves to the data, and we don't need to move the data. So if the data is generated, so data generation is getting democratized. So it's getting cheaper and cheaper to generate the data. But analyzing that data is expensive. So the project, the HIVE project, is trying to do is that democratize the analysis part of the big data in biological sciences.
So Vahan, when you're dealing with governments who a little queasy about this word democracy and everybody having free access and open access, how do you allow them to become comfortable with what it is that you're doing so they say that this is something that's really good for the government, it's really good for our people, so let's embrace this instead of saying, oh, these guys are trying to somehow take over or subvert what it is we're doing?
You see, technology is evolving, technology is changing. If a government, and it's not just our government, any government, if government doesn't evolve and include the technology, technology will move much faster, and government will lose the opportunity to benefit from that technology. And I think our government has done a great deal of accepting that, and our government has done a great deal of investing into this technology, and whatever investments are made, they are available for everyone. So we are developing this platform, and we are pretty much making it available for everyone who has enough hardware and software to use it. In a way, our government is helping us to do that. And democratization, in the sense which we are talking about, this is democratization of the infrastructure, so everybody can use it, not the democratization of political systems.
Yeah, we understand that, but just using the terminology, yes, some people get a little queasy about all that. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified it. So what we're doing then, Raja, is that we're trying to take, if we will, the hardware, the software of all this and make it more available to more people around the globe. Would that be kind of a short summary of what it is you're doing?
Yes. So our guiding principle is the ability to play with the big data, discover while playing, because you want to be able to do it fast enough, quick enough to analyze the big data, to be able to discover, and once you discover, to share. So these are the three things that we concentrate on. To play with big data, you need to have a system where it is fast enough. It has to be quick enough. So if you try to analyze something, and if it takes 10 days, that's not fast enough. So one of the things that we try to do is that make these analysis pipelines as fast as possible so that people can see the results in real time.
So let's say that I'm in a country, you know, like Peru, which is advancing at a very rapid rate. You have Ghana in Africa, which is, again, advancing at a much rapid rate. Now they have oil and natural gas. And maybe even a smallish country like Cambodia in Southeast Asia. All of these are actually, their economies are moving. They're developing. They're coming up with new ideas, new ways to apply this. So how can they take what you're doing through your School of Medicine and the health sciences, which really is public health, as I understand this long name. So how can they take this public health information you're learning through big data and actually apply it within their society?
So the way we think it's going to work is that the healthcare is going to change not only in the developed countries but also in the developing countries as genome sequencing becomes more and more popular.
Or maybe how it's going to be used in the developing countries, and maybe we can change in the developed countries.
Both sides can learn.
Right.
Yes. Okay. And what we are trying to do is that when a patient, let's say, walks into the hospital, you know, the genome gets sequenced, let's say, in the future or in the near future, then it gets analyzed and the doctor can prescribe based on the analysis. So all of this has to be done in real time. And if we cannot know or if we cannot handle big data, it cannot be done in real time. And that's where what we were saying earlier, only groups which have larger budgets may be able to use the big data if it is not democratized. But now what we are doing through Hive, people from all spectrum of society or around the world can use big data.
I tell you, I just think this is absolutely exciting what the two of you are doing. The fact you're collaborating in an organization as huge as the FDA in the United States and a very sophisticated, high-class university as George Washington University. But looking at all this, Vahan, and making this available, how are you translating that back on campus and with the work that you're doing, the collaboration between the two of you, so that the students, the faculty, and the researchers like at the FDA, they all really buy into this and they feel like this is something we really should be doing?
Well, I mean, the big data is what we work with, but actual cases which big data are is actual biological and medical information which we are handling. So that is where the interest is coming from scientists, from students. What we can do with big data, we can detect vaccine safety, we can detect food outbreak, food pathogen outbreak, infection outbreak, and we can use it for diagnostics. So the interest is generated because of what it can do, not because how it is built infrastructure-wise. So that is where the wide interest is coming, and that is where the developing countries can jump into this train, because the diagnosis will be cheaper, diagnosis will be easier, manufacturing of the pharmaceuticals or other healthcare subjects which were much more difficult and more expensive, now it will become more affordable for the third countries also. So that is what we are trying to do, create the backbone and then bring the applications, and in our case those are healthcare applications which will help better human lives not only here in the United States but everywhere in the world.
And that's really what's very important. 20 seconds. Vahan, what do you see for the future of Hive over the, say, the next 5-10 years?
I think the most important thing here is to let big data evolve. It will become something of its own. It will teach us and will help us and will take us for a ride.
Raja, 15 seconds, shorter. Where do you see?
What I feel is that Hive is going to also evolve as the data evolves.
Fantastic. I tell you, I like the way you give good clarity to that. And thanks to the two of you for being with us and sharing about what's going on at George Washington University, and also with the work you're doing with the Hive Project. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800-RUNAWAY.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet, coming to you from Washington, D.C. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the Executive Director and President of Emerald Planet, and also the Director and host of the Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a weekly basis talking about the various latest issues and also the best practices that we're able to identify in 144 different countries around the globe. And we're looking at those best practices in these countries that we can actually share, whether it's across 10 different communities or 10,000 communities, to allow people to learn about what's going on. And the Emerald Planet is the link to share these ideas and to take care of a planet that's going to 9 billion souls by 2050. And so we have a gentleman that's actually working in intellectual property and patent law that's actually looking at what is the future as far as how we're going to be able to take care of 2 billion new people we're going to be adding. And this gentleman is Kelly G. Heidemann, who is an attorney and partner at Shagru Meehan, a law firm in Washington, D.C. And Kelly, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your firm. That's a very interesting name, and tell us about it.
Well, Shagru Meehan is an intellectual property law firm, and we're a full-service firm. So we offer our clients services in patents, trademarks, licensing. We help them obtain intellectual property, and we help them enforce their rights in court when necessary. We also help them protect their rights by attacking competitors' patents when necessary at the Patent and Trademark Office, a new legal forum that's opened up in the last year.
Yeah, I think this is something that's very exciting. Of course, we're on the positive side of this, so we're trying to keep people out of the clutches of the courts and all that. And I think that's exactly what you're doing at Shagru, is where you're actually reaching in and trying to help people in advance of having any litigation or any problems with their patents and all that, so that you understand their processes and what is their intellectual property and then how to protect that. So how do you actually do that, where you balance where they are, where they want to go, and what is that bridge to make sure that everything is protected as it should be, but still it doesn't strangle the innovation within the company?
Well, our clients are primarily Fortune 500 companies.
So they've been at this a long time.
They're very sophisticated, and they understand the value of avoiding litigation when possible through licensing, cross-licensing, negotiating, and our clients encourage us to take that extra step to help them avoid litigation when possible. But sometimes a situation arises where the other guy just doesn't want to do anything but go to court. And in that case, we're there to stand up for them.
Looking at this whole notion of big data, this is really kind of the core in the cloud computing and all that. How these big Fortune 500 companies are all moving very dramatically into the big data arena and also cloud computing. So what do you see for the future of what they're doing as far as they're moving forward at a fast clip and to actually green their processes, but also develop new products that's actually innovating and bringing new ways to address climate change and all these other challenges as we add 2 billion new people to the planet?
Well, certainly our clients understand the importance of protecting the environment because they're in it for the long term. And I'm not just speaking about the Fortune 500 companies, but we do a lot of work with small and mid-sized companies and a few select very small companies. But I can say, quite honestly, each one of them, from the small company that's working on bioprocesses that turn waste products into other useful materials, up to our largest clients that are producing some of the most popular consumer products and doing it in a green way, that's on the top of everyone's list.
Yeah, looking at this whole thing as far as greening the product line, greening the process, zero landfills, zero carbon footprint, this is very important. But many of these companies, whether they're small, medium, or large scale, it's just like, the president's really wanting people to export more, to get in more international markets. So how do you really help them, advise them, so that they make sure that these new products, these new processes, even new maybe manufacturing lines are actually protected as they move into these new markets, whether it's a very large market like a China or a very small market, say in Africa or Latin America?
Well, of course, we have very good relationships with firms that are throughout the world. Being U.S. attorneys, we're allowed to practice in the U.S. only. But in order to take care of our clients' needs to take their business outside the U.S., we form very close, lasting relationships with some select law firms outside the U.S. And of course, we make them and their expertise available to our clients as they want. But one of the things you mentioned, Sam, the president's being encouraged about green technology and looking at greening the process. In the U.S. and in the developed world, that's a luxury that presidents of some companies in developing countries don't really have.
So looking at people moving in, how do you use this whole notion of big data, cloud computing to make sure that you're protecting them as they move in? Because just because they've, say, filed in Germany or they filed in the United States or Japan doesn't mean they're going to be protected all over the globe. So how do you advise to make sure, when's that time you need to be filing in, these maybe smaller markets that they want to move into, maybe marginal as far as their operations are concerned, but yet still critically important if they want to be able to expand through, say, across Latin America, Southeast Asia, or the continent of Africa?
Well, for U.S. clients, they're going to take advantage of some international treaties that make it easy to file an international type application, and then after a process of examination by some examiner somewhere wearing the international examiner's hat, then they'll look at what countries at that stage still look most appealing to them to go into. Now, if you put the shoe on the other foot and you're looking at a small company, maybe in Ghana or someplace like that wants to come into the U.S., well, we can advise them as well. But whether they're in Ghana or whether they're a U.S. company looking to go into Germany, the big new point that they need to understand is that you need to file first before you start publicizing your invention. Whereas in the recent past, U.S. law was a lot more friendly towards public disclosures prior to filing. Now it's the other way around.
Yeah, and this is this first to file versus the first to discover. I know that's a huge change as far as the United States is concerned, and really it's more or less bringing us into compliance to other countries that have had this first to file for many, many years. But using big data, how can we avoid this frivolous litigation over infringement? There's a number of huge companies now that are just seem like they're locked in constant battles, whether it's the courts within the United States or it's Europe or Asia. So how do we try to avoid some of that? Or is it just the fact that as these countries and these companies just grow larger and larger, some of this litigation is just going to be with us?
Okay, so doing business in the United States means coping with litigation. And the more successful you become, the more likely you are to suffer a lawsuit. And so one thing you can do is attack the other guy's patent. So if someone has a frivolous lawsuit they're going to launch, it's going to be over some patent that's kind of like what you're doing. It sounds like it covers the world. And what you have to do is leverage big data to search the world over, in languages beyond English, because there's a lot of knowledge outside the US that you can take advantage of and bring to bear to show that this patent should never have been granted, it had been done before. And then the second thing you can do in terms of leveraging big data is to understand the landscape that you're walking into before you set foot there. So one thing to do is try to find out who has intellectual property in the areas that your product is going to touch on. And then what patents do they have? And break that down. What patents ought you to be concerned about from companies that are actively litigating?
Yeah, this is one of the things too, as far as your trademark and copyrights. Many people think, well, I'm in the United States, so as long as I file my copyright trademarks here, then I'm probably okay around the globe. And people in Germany may have the same thought for their market, or Japan, what have you. But now that we really truly have an international marketplace, that's not really true anymore. Is that there may be somebody that's actually filed, and maybe for years ago. I know there's several companies that there have been filings maybe 50, 60 years ago, were still current in the country. They want to move into that market. All of a sudden, they're getting faced with a lawsuit saying, look, you're infringing on something my family did in the 1930s. So I know using big data, you're supposed to be able to find that. So how are you, through Sugru Mayan, leveraging big data so that I'm moving into the Spanish market, or I'm moving across Northern Africa? How do I find that? And I'm going across Spanish, Arabic, local dialects. How do we manage all that?
Yeah, it's very challenging. Of course, at Sugru, we're a firm of IP attorneys, and we can't do everything. One of the things we can't do is search in Arabic, Spanish, etc. So we do have, just like we have relationships with law firms abroad, we have relationships with search firms in the US and abroad who have technical experts that speak the languages that you need. So what we do is let's say a client's going to go into an Arabic-speaking area. Well, we need to have a search done of what intellectual property rights exist already in those countries. Mm-hmm. And of course, we'll enlist the help of our trusted associates in carrying out that task.
Well, looking at it, and we're just about run out of time. It's amazing every time we get together, is just how quickly time flies. But look in this whole thing, the attention to detail, the planning, the processing. We only have about a minute on this. But how can people really plan for success in a market, avoid the litigation, avoid the roadblocks, and yet be able to move their innovative technologies and processes forward? Because we're going to need it as we move through the 21st century.
Well, this is something I haven't mentioned before, but I think it's very important for small companies not just to keep records of their inventive activities, but also to have a discipline, a data architecture, where they positively manage what information they keep, what information they don't keep, what information they archive forever and never let it go. But that's very important to litigation ready your small company.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Over the next 5, 10, 15 years, where do you see Sugru Mayan going?
Well, we see us taking advantage of our tremendous IT infrastructure, our tremendous people, to help our tremendous clients secure their IP rights and defend them wherever they need.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I tell you, Kelly, it's always good to have you back with us on Emerald Planet. Kelly G. Heidman, who is an attorney at Sugru Mayan. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing as we create the Emerald Planet.